vegetable oils actually expected to increase one's risk of cardiovascular disease? This is one of the few heterodox claims that seems shared across virtually all crank diet cults. This notion is doctrine in the whole food plant-based meme diet cult, to the ketogenic meme diet cult, to the carnivore meme diet cult. It seems ubiquitous in all of those circles. Today, we're going to explore if it's more reasonable to believe this idea than not. Well, first off, what are vegetable oils? Vegetable oils constitute an assortment of culinary oils derived from a number of plant sources, such as sunflower seeds, rapeseed, soybeans, and even wheat kernels. These oils typically differ from animal-derived oils in that they primarily consist of unsaturated fatty acids, predominantly linoleic acid and oleic acid instead of saturated fatty acids. This difference in fatty acid composition is understood to affect serum concentrations of what are called low-density lipoproteins, or LDL, in humans and influence the risk of cardiovascular disease. Well, let's just get straight into it. To provide the initial evidence opposing the claim that vegetable oils cause cardiovascular disease, a comprehensive 2018 meta-analysis showed that linoleic acid was associated with a borderline significant 12% decrease in the risk of heart attacks in randomized controlled trials. A 2020 meta-analysis also showed around double the magnitude of risk reduction in clinical trials wherein vegetable oils, more broadly, were substituted for saturated fat. Across these two meta-analyses, only 2 of the included trials were reasonably well-powered, and only 1 was particularly well-designed. Nevertheless, nearly the same magnitude of benefit was observed for cardiovascular disease mortality when aggregating data from prospective cohort studies which look at dietary intake, or even biomarkers of vegetable oil intake like linoleic acid. Likely the best human intervention trial investigating the use of vegetable oils in the primary prevention of cardiovascular disease was the LA Veterans Administration Hospital study back in the 1960s. This randomized controlled inpatient trial entailed a strict double-blind substitution of vegetable oils for saturated animal fats. And these researchers went above and beyond. They even commissioned companies to invent new foods that substituted vegetable oils for natural animal fats in order to maintain blinding in the subjects. And again, in stark opposition to the predictions of the claim that vegetable oils cause cardiovascular disease, the trial found a statistically significant 36% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular disease events and a 33% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular-related death among those in the vegetable oil group. However, there are some authors in the scientific literature itself that challenge the notion that vegetable oils are indeed cardioprotective. The most concise account of such a hypothesis can be found in a 2018 narrative review paper by DiNicolantonio and O'Keefe. The authors conclude that the ostensible increase in risk is mediated by the oxidation of some of the same unsaturated fatty acids that we just discussed a moment ago, namely the omega-6 fatty acid linoleic acid. Specifically, these authors argue that linoleic acid oxidation produces compounds such as malendialdehyde, or MDA for short, which oxidatively modify LDL particles and initiate the atherosclerotic process. The authors then go on to recommend against the consumption of vegetable oils for this reason. But although the linoleic acid oxidation hypothesis seems intuitively plausible, if not actually compelling at first glance, it suffers from a fatal flaw. That is, holding to the hypothesis that something increases the risk of cardiovascular disease if and only if something facilitates the oxidative modification of LDL particles leads one to affirm the absurd position that omega-3 fatty acids such as alpha-linolenic acid, or EPA or DHA, must also be atherogenic and increase cardiovascular disease risk. The evidence for this fatal flaw is that not only do omega-3 fatty acids also produce MDA when oxidized, they actually produce more MDA than linoleic acid. So why do DiNicolantonio and O'Keefe declare in their review that omega-3 fatty acids are cardioprotective? Which they are, but why are they claiming that? Without a symmetry breaker, this just straightforwardly entails a contradiction on their hypothesis, leaving them with a position that affirms that it both is and is not the case that omega-3 fatty acids protect against cardiovascular disease. And it should go without saying that a hypothesis that entails a contradiction should probably not be given much credence. Beyond that, there are a few additional issues with the oxidized linoleic acid hypothesis, such as the utter incompatibility with the prevailing understanding of cardiovascular disease pathophysiology. The oxidative modification of LDL particles is indeed a necessary step in facilitating atherogenesis. However, the consequences of LDL's relative susceptibility to oxidize are often overstated by this crowd. The most simple reason is that, based on the most well-defended, well-understood explanation for atherogenesis, the response to retention hypothesis, LDL simply binding to certain protein structures within the artery wall will massively increase LDL oxidation rates. In fact, binding to those structures is sufficient to initiate LDL oxidation. That's regardless of factors such as the linoleic acid content of LDL particles or linoleic acid's relative susceptibility to oxidation. Once the LDL enters the arterial wall, oxidation is virtually inevitable, regardless of the LDL susceptibility to oxidation via linoleic acid. But I'll have another video about that in the future. In support of this, we note that not only has mechanistic research upheld the predictions of the response to retention hypothesis, but human interventions generally failed to support LDL oxidation as a useful target for cardiovascular disease prevention. We must remember that evidence is just another word for that which is more expected on a given hypothesis rather than its negation, and different hypotheses will often make different predictions about what to expect from observation and intervention. The vast majority of the data on this subject does not produce results that are expected on the aforementioned hypothesis that vegetable oils cause cardiovascular disease or even increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. With that in mind, the oxidized linoleic acid hypothesis predicts that 1. Consuming more vegetable oil increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, and 2. Therapies targeting a reduction in LDL oxidation should decrease cardiovascular disease risk, and 3. Omega-3 fatty acids should actually increase cardiovascular disease risk. However, the bulk of the strongest evidence is not consistent with these predictions. In summary, numerous lines of evidence divulge that consuming vegetable oil associates with a reduction in cardiovascular disease risk, including heart disease, particularly when replacing dietary saturated fat from animal foods. There is a striking incongruity between the scientific literature on vegetable oils and the amount of reports speculating about their harms. While it is true that vegetable oils tend to increase the susceptibility of certain lipoproteins to oxidize, this does not entail that vegetable oils increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. Alright everybody, thanks for watching, and if you like this kind of content, you can sponsor the creation of more content like it. All of the relevant links are in the description below, and I'll see you in the next one.